I'm Valerie. Welcome to the owner's class video for the Singer Quantum Stylist 9960 sewing machine. In this video, we're going to go over some great stuff like a tour of the machine, threading a needle, winding a bobbin, selecting stitches, making buttonholes, and a bunch of other great stuff. This machine has a lot of capabilities, and you can read all about them in your instruction manual, full of all sorts of great information, so you'll want to keep this handy. Let's take a tour of the machine. The first thing we're going to do with our machine is plug in the power cord and the foot control and turn the machine on. And you'll know the machine is on when the light and screen come on. On the side of your machine we have a hand wheel that you always should turn towards you. On the top we have a carry handle which makes our machine extra portable. And we have a lid that opens up to show all of the stitches we get with this machine. And underneath this lid we have a bobbin winding stopper, a bobbin winding spindle, a spool pin where our thread's going to go, and it already comes with some spool felt and a spool cap, a bobbin winding tension disc, and a metal guide for threading. On the front of our machine we have our screen, some function buttons, and some quick select stitch buttons, and these show our most commonly used utility stitches. Over here we have a speed control lever, an automatic thread trimmer, a needle up-down button which also doubles as a button that can slow down the machine while we're sewing while pressed, a reverse button, a start-stop button which lets us use the machine when the foot control is unplugged, and the light will be green when the presser foot's down, and that lets you know you can sew. When we use the presser foot lever to raise the presser foot, the light turns red, which means that we should not be sewing now. Down here we have our needle, our all-purpose presser foot, built-in needle threader, and over here is a buttonhole lever, and we'll talk about that more when we make a buttonhole. Down here we have our bobbin, and if we remove our accessory tray, we expose the free arm of the machine, which allows us to sew things like pants hems and cuffs really easily. On the front of the free arm, we have these little markings and a lever, and this is our drop feed lever. Right now, the feed teeth are up, and if we move it over to the left, our feed teeth go down. This is great if we want to do any free motion sewing or sewing on buttons. To raise the feed teeth again, just move this back over to the right and turn your hand wheel one complete rotation. And they're back up. In your accessory tray, we also get some really great accessories. Let's take a look at some of those presser feet. In addition to the all-purpose foot that already comes on your machine, you get all of these other presser feet too. And that includes a zipper foot, which is used for inserting zippers, but you can also use it for making and inserting piping. A button sewing foot, which is the foot that's clear with the two blue toes, and that's used for sewing on buttons. A blind hem foot, used for making blind hems, which is great on like wool trousers. A cording foot, which is used to sew up to 3 cords in the groove, and you sew a decorative stitch over them to embellish whatever project you want. A satin stitch foot, which is used for sewing satin stitches, great for applique. A rolled hem foot, for making a professional rolled hem. Open toe foot, which is transparent and has a wide opening so that you can easily apply and see trims. An overcasting foot, which helps you sew overcasting stitches, which is really great on knit fabrics. A buttonhole foot, so you can sew buttonholes. A patchwork foot, which sews at a 1/4 inch, which is really great for quilting. And speaking of quilting, we also get a darning embroidery foot, which is great for free motion quilting or making freehand monograms, and the even feed walking foot, which is great if you're sewing over multiple layers that might shift, so like a quilt sandwich or velvet. Now it's time to thread our bobbin. The first thing I'm going to do is raise the presser foot and move this little black button over to the right. That pops off my clear view cover so I can reach in and get my bobbin. This machine uses class 15 transparent bobbins, so if you need to go to the store and buy more bobbins, make sure they're a transparent class 15. Otherwise, they're not going to work in the machine very well. Now we're going to put our spool of thread in the machine, so remove the spool cap and put your thread on the spool pin. cap it off. Bring your thread over to where it says number 1, and bring it under that, and then bring it to this metal thread guide and around. Now you're at the bobbin winding tension disc, so bring the thread under this little finger looking area and bring it back and around the bobbin winding tension disc, and make sure the thread's secure underneath. Now come over to your bobbin winding spindle and put the thread into the bobbin and out a hole on the top. Grab the tail and snap the bobbin onto the spindle, and make sure it's all the way on, or the thread could possibly wrap around the spindle, and that's kind of a pain to get off. Move the spindle over to the right, and that engages the bobbin winding mode, and you can also see that on your screen. Either press the foot control, or if your foot control is removed, you can use the start-stop button to begin winding. When the thread tail is buried, clip the thread on top, flush with the top, and wind the bobbin until you are satisfied with how full it is, or until it is full. When the bobbin is full, the machine will beep and stop winding. Move the bobbin winding spindle back to the left, take off your bobbin, and trim the thread. Now we can put it into the machine. Before we put our bobbin into our bobbin case, make sure that the thread is coming off in a counterclockwise direction, or the tail will make it look like the letter P. P for perfect sewing. Put the bobbin into the bobbin case, lightly hold the top of your bobbin with your finger, and bring the thread under this metal piece, and lay it off to the side. Snap on your clear view cover, and we're ready to thread the upper thread. If you just wound a bobbin, the top of your machine probably looks like this. I'm going to remove the thread back towards the spool pin, and I'm going to start over. So number 1, I'm going to go under here. I'm going to bring it around number 2, down number 3, U-turn at number 4, and another big U-turn at number 5, and back down to 6. Then I'm going to place my thread into the metal guide right above the needle, use my finger to push down on the built-in needle threader, and bring the thread under the hook and over. Now there are prongs encompassing the needle, so bring the thread in between those prongs. Hold the thread so that there's some light tension, and release the built-in needle threader. Now there's a little loop behind your needle, and pull it. Now your needle's threaded. But there's one last thing I want to do. I want to draw up the bobbin thread. So hold the upper thread in your hand and turn the hand wheel towards you 1 complete rotation. And when I pull on the upper thread, I see another loop. That's my bobbin thread. So I'm going to pull that up and put both threads underneath the presser foot. Now we're ready to test sew. Now I'm ready to test and make sure I threaded the machine properly. When I turned the machine on, it already selected a straight stitch. So all I need to do is place my fabric underneath the presser foot, lower it, and begin sewing. The needle will stop in the down position, so press your needle up-down button, and that raises the needle to the highest position. But on this machine we also have an automatic thread trimmer, so I'm going to press that button, raise the presser foot, and it automatically trimmed my thread. It looks good on the top and the bottom, so my machine is threaded properly and I'm ready to sew my project. However, if I'd sewn and it looked like this on the top, but this mess on the bottom, it means that I probably didn't thread my upper thread properly. Rethread your machine and check your manual. Now let's sew a seam. Now I'm ready to sew a seam on my project. My machine is already set for the straight stitch, which we can see on our screen, and I also see an icon that looks like a presser foot with the letter A on it. That's our all-purpose foot, which is already on the machine. When I go to my needle plate, I see all of these lines and measurement markings, such as 3/8 and 5/8. 5/8 is a very common seam allowance, so I'm going to line up my fabric with that line. Lower the presser foot, and sew forward a few stitches, and then press and hold the reverse button to sew backwards a few stitches. and release the button and continue sewing. When you reach the end of your fabric, press and hold the reverse button to sew backwards a few stitches. And now press your automatic thread trimmer. Raise your presser foot. And here's our lovely seam. I did a reverse stitch at the beginning and end to make sure that the seam doesn't unravel. Now let's work on some other stitches. Before we start sewing a new stitch, let's take a look at the front panel of our machine. On the front we have some function buttons, and on the side we have some of our most commonly used utility stitches. Whenever I press them, the stitch changes and we can see an illustration of the stitch as well as what presser foot to use. I'm going to go back to the center straight stitch, and on my screen I see these two black boxes. One has a zigzag and some straight lines, and one looks like a double helix. I'm going to press the button under the one that has the zigzag, and what that will do when I'm in straight stitch mode is change my stitch length or change my needle position. Right here I see the icon of a needle with some arrows, so if I move the arrow so the number is bigger, my needle moves to the right. And if I make the number smaller, the needle moves to the left. When I'm back at the default setting, a black box will show up on my numbers. And I can also change stitch length. To get out of this menu, press the button under this little clear arrow. This double helix is my tension, so if I press the button under that icon, I can adjust my tension. And I might want to do that for using specialty threads or techniques. If I raise my tension quite a bit and I want to get it back to auto, just press the button under auto and it's back to the default. I'm going to go back to the main screen, so I'm going to press this button under the arrow. Now I want to select a stitch that's on my lid. I see on my lid I have a couple of icons, one that looks like a straight stitch and a zigzag, and one that looks like a scallop stitch and ABC. Right now we're going to focus on the continuous stitches, which are the ones with the straight stitch and zigzag. And I want to do stitch number 50, which looks really pretty. I'm going to come back down to my function buttons and press the button that matches that zigzag straight stitch icon. And I will see stitches 1 to 5. Press your scroll button, and I'll start going up the number of stitches. Keep scrolling until you see the stitch you want. Here's number 50, and I'm going to press the button under that stitch. Now I see it selected on my screen, and it tells me I need to change my presser foot to the B foot. Before we sew our stitch, we need to change the presser foot. Behind the presser foot is a little black button, so push it and the presser foot comes off. I need to use the B foot, so I'm going to put that under this area, and I'm going to lower the presser foot lifter. And I'll hear it snap into place. Move the thread under the presser foot, and we're ready to start getting our fabric. So I have it here. Place it under the presser foot, lower it, and begin sewing. Once I reach the end of my fabric, I'm going to press the automatic thread trimmer and raise the presser foot. And there's my stitch. Now I'm going to come back to my screen and press the function button under the icon that looks like a zigzag. Now I can change my stitch width and stitch length. First, I'm going to narrow my stitch width, and I'm going to set it to number 4. Let's try that one out. Put your fabric under the presser foot, lower it, and begin sewing. Stop sewing when you reach the end of your fabric and press your automatic thread trimmer. Raise your presser foot and remove the fabric. Now I want to change the stitch length of the stitch. So I'm going to set my stitch width back to default, which I can see when the black goes behind the 7.0. And I want to lower my stitch length, so let's make it 1.8. Let's try that out. Put the fabric under the presser foot, lower it, and begin sewing. Stop sewing at the end of your fabric and press the automatic thread trimmer, and raise the presser foot. And here's our stitch out, showing the default stitch, the stitch where we made it more narrow, and the stitch where we shortened the stitch length. Now let's check out our programmable stitches. To view my programmable stitches, I'm going to come up to the lid and go to the icon that looks like a scallop stitch and ABC. And there I can see all of my programmable stitches. To select that mode, go down to the function buttons and press the one that looks like a scallop stitch and ABC. And now I see some of those stitches. I also see a presser foot icon with the letter B, which means I need to use my satin stitch foot. If I press that ABC button again, I see my alphabet stitches. And every time I press this button, I can scroll through one of my 5 alphabets. I want to stitch out Val Sews because my name is Val and I like sewing. But I also want to add some hearts in it because I really like sewing. So I see that I'm in my programmable decorative stitches, and I'm going to scroll through until I see stitch 18, which is this heart. Press the button, and we see it on our screen. Now I'm going to come back down to the ABC button, and I'm going to scroll through these letters using the scroll button. Here I see V, so I'm going to select V, scroll back for A, and scroll again for L. But now I need to put a space in it. So I'm going to continue to scroll past my lowercase letters and past my numbers until I see this one that looks like a box. That box is a space. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to keep going forward and select the letter S. Then scroll back for E, scroll for W, and back to S. I want another heart at the end, so I'm going to press that ABC button and go through my alphabets until I'm back to the programmable decorative stitches. I'm going to scroll again, so I'm on stitch 18, the other heart, select it, and I only want the sequence to stitch out once. So back on my function buttons, there's this button that looks like a little bullseye. I'm going to press that, and that will make my machine stop sewing after the sequence. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to take my fabric and put it under the presser foot, lower it, and begin sewing. The machine will stop sewing after the sequence, and then I'll press the automatic thread trimmer and raise the presser foot. And that's what my sequence looks like. And after I trim all those thread tails, it looks like this. Now I want to change my stitch sequence from Val Sews to Valerie Sews. I'm going to come back to my screen, and I'm going to push this button right here to bring me back to the beginning of my sequence so I can see it more easily. I'm going to scroll with this small arrow button. And whenever you insert characters, you want the highlight to be on whatever character is to the right of where you want to add it. And I'll show you. So I'm going to press the ABC button and scroll. Actually, I don't need to scroll. There's my letter E. So E, and we see it's inserted. I'm going to scroll to R, add that, I, and back to E. Now the stitch sequence is ready to sew. Now let's stitch it out. press the automatic thread trimmer, raise the presser foot, and here's our new sequence. Now let's check out elongation stitches. This machine has a great feature called stitch elongation. But what does that mean, and how does that differ from stitch length? Here I have a scallop stitch that was stitched on the default setting at 1 times elongation. And here we have it at 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times. How this differs from stitch length is that even though the stitch gets longer, we still maintain the density of the stitch. Here's an example where I just changed the stitch length, and you'll notice that the stitches get further apart. So we're going to focus on how to do stitch elongation. On your lid, you will see that some of your stitches have an icon that shows ×2 or ×5. And there's also a little legend to the side that shows that your continuous stitches, certain ones have the ×2, which means they'll elongate up to 2 times, and some of your programmable stitches can elongate up to 5 times. Let's try sewing out that scallop stitch. To select the scallop stitch, press that ABC button that selects your programmable stitches, and I see that it's number 1, so I'm going to select that. Now I'm going to press the Edit button, and I see these icons. This one is for elongation, and it's already on ×1, so let's stitch it out. Stop sewing at the end of your fabric and trim the thread using the auto thread trimmer. Now I want to elongate it by 2. So I'm going to press my Edit button again, and I'm going to press this elongation icon so that I see ×2. And then I'm going to stitch again. Stop sewing at the end of the fabric and trim the thread. Now let's sew it by 3 elongation. So press the Edit button, press the button that corresponds with the icon so it says ×3, and begin sewing again. Stop sewing at the end of your fabric and trim your thread. Now let's do it ×4. So press the Edit button, press the button for elongation so it says ×4, and stitch again. Stop sewing at the end of your fabric and trim your thread. Okay, one more time now. Let's do some elongation. Press the Edit button and press the button so it says elongation ×5, and stitch it out. Stop sewing at the end of the fabric and trim the thread. And here we have stitch elongation. Now let's check out mirror imaging. Another great feature on this machine is mirror imaging. On your lid, at your legend, you'll see that there are some stitches that can do side-to-side mirroring, front and back mirroring, or can do side to side and front to back. I'm going to do stitch number 22, which does the side to side and front to back. So I'm going to select the mode icon that looks like a straight stitch in a zigzag and scroll over to 22. Select it, and right here I see a box that looks like a cross with a triangle in the corner. I'm going to stitch out the way it is right now. Stop sewing at the end of the fabric and trim the thread. Now I'm going to press the button for this icon to show side-to-side mirror imaging. And I'm going to sew again to see what it looks like. Stop sewing at the end and trim your thread. I'm going to come back and push that button again to show front and back mirror imaging. Stop sewing at the end of the fabric and trim the thread. And one more time now, I'm going to press that mirror imaging button, and I see that it's mirrored to the side and mirrored forward back. So I'm going to stitch that one out. And here's what stitch number 22 looks like mirror imaged. Now let's check out buttonholes. This machine comes with a wide variety of buttonhole styles. We have bar tack buttonholes, keyhole buttonholes, stretch buttonholes, and even a buttonhole for bound buttonholes. I'm going to select the basic bar tack buttonhole 104. So I'm going to come to my function button that looks like a straight stitch and a zigzag, and I'm going to scroll until I see 104. And I'm going to select the stitch. And my screen is telling me that I need to attach the buttonhole foot. But first, I'm going to go to my fabric, which is the same fabric I'm going to use on my project. And I'm going to mark the top of the buttonhole. And then I'm going to make a guideline. I highly recommend sewing on a piece of scrap fabric like your project before sewing on your actual project. So here's our buttonhole foot. And this particular buttonhole foot comes with an underplate, which sandwiches our fabric and helps prevent any slipping of the fabric. I'm going to pull down on this top part, insert my button, and push it back up. Now it's going to sew the right size for my button. Remove the presser foot that's on the machine and attach the buttonhole foot. And sometimes the feed teeth kind of grab onto it, so just wiggle it around until you get in the right position where you can lower this and snap the foot into place. Then lower the buttonhole lever between the two white pieces. Take your fabric and line the top part of your marking so that it's in this hole. Lower the presser foot and begin sewing. The machine will stop sewing when the buttonhole is done. Press the automatic thread trimmer. Raise the presser foot. And here's your buttonhole. Now I need to open up my buttonhole so I can put my button through it. Take a pin and insert it at the top of the buttonhole. This way, we don't slice through the bar tack. In your accessory tray is a seam ripper, and this is also super useful for opening up buttonholes. Insert it at the bottom, and carefully work your way up to the top. Remove the pin, and now the buttonhole is ready for your button. Now let's see how to change a needle. From time to time, you'll need to change the needle on your machine depending on what kind of fabric you're sewing. Two very common types of needles are regular point needles and ballpoint needles. Regular point needles are used on woven fabrics such as quilting cotton, silk, and wool. Ballpoint needles are used on stretchy knit fabrics like t-shirt knits, swimsuit knits, and sweatshirt knits. Each needle style comes in a variety of sizes depending on the weight of your fabric. We have lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight styles. Now let's change a needle. Before changing the needle, I'm going to turn off the machine. To make changing the needle a little easier, I'm going to remove the presser foot. And one extra tip, I'm going to put a piece of paper on the needle plate covering up the hole so that I don't accidentally drop my needle into the machine. Grab the needle and take the screwdriver that came in your accessory tray and loosen the screw. Remove and discard the needle. Take a new needle and with the flat side to the back, insert it as high as it will go and tighten the screw. And we've changed a needle. That's our video. Thanks for watching. For more information, please check out your instruction manual or the Singer website. Happy sewing!